Reddit, what's your favorite no ducking way story? I was deployed in Iraq and was out on a convoy on deck 31, 2007. Long story short, I unknowingly pissed on an IED, which exploded 30 seconds after I walked away. This was on my birthday. TLDR. Trudge trudge piss trudge trudge boom. My friend, John, is a paramedic and firefighter. He also teaches and certifies first aid CPR. Now, for those that don't know, CPR is not very effective. It has a very low success rate, unless initiated soon after an incident, which is why everyone should learn CPR, even after revival. Many people have serious health effects. One day, John gets into a pretty bad car accident and goes into cardiac arrest. The paramedics and police are dispatched. The officer first on scene knows CPR and initiates chest compression on John. John is revived, and although suffered severe memory loss, is well. The kicker, John taught the officer CPR the week prior to the incident. Inserted my USB flash drive correctly the first time. When I was 17, I worked for an excavation demolition company for the summer. We were gutting an old mill in New Hampshire to turn into high-end lofts. One of the workers was standing on the top of some scaffold about 12-15 feet up using a handheld bandsaw to cut through a large pipe. As he was cutting, a strap supporting the pipe broke, letting it drop down and pinch the blade. This made the saw shoot back towards him and push him off the scaffold. This guy did a complete ducking backflip while holding a working saw from over 10 feet up. He landed on his feet, saw still running. Everyone stopped and stared at him for about 5 seconds before we went back to work. TLDR. I worked with a redneck Jackie Chan in New Hampshire, who does backflips with power tools. My girlfriend and I were traveling in Italy and met this nice Australian girl on the train from Rome to Naples. We chatted a bit and learned that she had just left her friend in North Africa to start traveling on her own. Fast forward 2 weeks and my girlfriend and I are now on a bus from Brasov, Romania to Bucharest, and we ended up randomly meeting the Australian girl's friend that was left in North Africa. My brother's friends are twins and are friends with the Bush twins. Makes for a cute photo op. Well, about 7 years ago they were invited to their birthday party at the White House. It was a gag gift party. As they are going through the metal detectors, the Secret Service inspect the box with the presents, pull out 2 giant black dildos. They stare down my brother's friends before proceeding to burst out laughing. I still can't ducking believe they went through with it. The truly giant balls. Flying 1,100 miles for an interview. I hear someone across the aisle yell my name. I'm thinking, that voice sounds familiar. Turns out it was one of my good friends from college. I'm thinking no ducking way he got an interview the same time I did. And we stayed next door at the same hotel the night before the interview. And now we're housemates. Both got the job. The end. One winter, I went sledding down a popular hill in my hometown with my brother and his wife. At the bottom of the hill, there's a frozen pond. My sister-in-law hopped on the back of my sled, sitting backwards, and we went down together. Due to the extra mass, we started going way faster than I'd expected. When I noticed we were heading right toward a little kid, I just couldn't maneuver out of the way. So I leaned forward and scooped the kid up, holding him up like Simba. Then I realized we were still about to sled into a frozen pond. So I bailed out and held the kid as high over my head as I could. I stood up, set the kid down, and looked around for his parents. When I saw a big dude coming at me, I was like, oh, here we go. Then he got closer and I realized it was of my closest friends, and that the kid I ran into was his son who I babysit regularly. I thought to myself, no ducking way, and gave him a big hug. The kid said he thought it was awesome. The day after I proposed to my wife, we were at the Science Fiction Museum in Seattle, WA. There is an exhibit that is a giant tumbler full of yellow beads, like thousands of yellow beads, and one black one. It is meant to illustrate the unlikelihood of finding life in the universe. I called her over to tell her how cool it was, and she just points at it casually and says, there's the black one. And she has continued to amaze me every day since. Good times. My sister was driving down the street at 45 miles per hour with her windows open and a deer ran into the street. Instead of hitting this deer, the deer jumped into her car through the window, landed with its head in the foot part of the passenger side seat and its butt on the headrest. The deer was freaked the duck out and with its butt in the air, proceeded to it all over the car. She obviously pulled over. Several people stopped to help and asked her where the deer was. She just stood there screaming, "IT's in the car. IT's in the car." A helpful man opened the door, pulled the deer out, and the deer bounded off like nothing happened. For imagery, she was driving a late 90s Ford Escort at the time. No one believes this story, but it is 100% true. Not quite as exciting, but I was walking back to my car from work when I saw a guy laying on the riverbank. He looked incredibly sick and was bright red from laying in the sun. I asked him if he was alright and he gurgled up an answer. So I gave him water and food while I waited for the police to get there. Turns out he was a sex offender who had been running around town that day, crossing intersections with his pants at his ankles. They had been trying to catch him but couldn't find him. I've heard many different versions of this story, most of them based in Amsterdam and people thinking that little people children were trolls gremlins. A friend of an old roommate of mine was at the airport a few years ago and saw Bill Nye the ducking science guy at the terminal next to his. Eventually, he got up the courage to talk to him, but it was nothing more than small chat and praise. Bill's plane gets called, so the kid leaves him be and sits back down trying to digest how cool his life just became, but a few minutes go by and all of a sudden he hears his name called. Bill Nye is standing at the gate and calls out, "Hey kid." Science rules, then boards the plane. A few years ago, I made plans to go see Nine Inch Nails in Massachusetts on their final tour with a friend of mine along with his two friends. We're from NY. On the trip in, the MIA song Paper Planes comes on and three of us start singing along, making all the noises obnoxiously, which annoyed the fourth guy, Shane. He tells us that he hates the song, which ended up being bad idea, because my friend found and purchased the single for that song, complete with 5 remixes. Later that day, we headed into town a couple days early, so there was plenty of annoying Shane with the song, along with making jokes about how maybe if we ask nicely Trent Reznor will play it at the concert. The day of the concert comes, and as the opening act, Street Sweeper Social Club plays their set, the singer announces this next song isn't on our album, and launches into a cover of, you guessed it, Paper Planes. It took a few moments to sink in because I really couldn't believe that it was actually happening. It was too perfect. Here we had been annoying him obnoxiously for the entire trip with this song, which the rest of us genuinely liked, for the record, only to have the opening act of the concert played out of nowhere. When my ma was about 19 or 20, her and her twin sister were shopping in Lake City when they were approached by a man in a nice car. He asked if they wanted to get in and maybe have a drink. Ma said he was rather handsome, but they turned him down. Later that year, it was revealed on the news that the man that had approached them was Ted Bundy, and after they turned him down, he abducted and killed his last known Florida victim. TL. Dr. Ma almost got killed by Ted Bundy. I was outside eating at a burger joint, and Bill Ducking Murray comes up and takes a French fry. He told me no one will ever believe you. Here's mine. I was walking my older dog one night around 10 PM. I had him off leash since it was late and we were in a neighborhood. No one to bother. I kept track of him for poo duty as he sniffed around and we were approaching an intersection. The house we were walking along was 20 feet from the sidewalk, where I was, and was edged by very large juniper bushes which he was checking out. Suddenly he stopped and dove into a bush. This was odd considering he was nearing 10 years old and although he's active, he's not crazy like that. Note lab husky mutt for reference. Out of the bush comes some sort of snarl scream and all I could think was it. He got a raccoon, and out leaps a immature mountain lion, at least 20% larger than my dog. It runs off down the road, and I stand there, terrified, yelling no ducking way as he comes back to me wagging ass like he's the greatest dog ever. Which is very likely considering that cat was much bigger than me. It was probably his most well-earned rawhide bone he's ever earned. Ninja Reddit regarding bone. Oh Reddit, you so silly. My roommate had a huge fish tank with 4 cichlids in it. One of them, the pink one, was really ducking mean and used to pick on the other ones. I hated him. One night, I had a dream that I caught him with a net, threw him in a pan with some butter, fried him up, and ate him. The next morning I walked by the fish tank, looked in to discover that the pink one was gone. I freaked out and looked all over the tank for him. He's nowhere to be found. When my roommate got home from work, I told him about my dream and that the pink cichlid is missing. He looked at me, visibly shaken, and said, "Dude, I'm gonna start locking my bedroom door at night." Days and weeks go by. I'm truly disturbed that I'm capable of sleep eating my roommate's pets. Finally, I'm so overcome with anxiety that I decide to scour the tank, CSI style, looking for clues. I pressed my face against every square inch of the tank, desperate to salvage a shred of sanity. After what must have been at least an hour, something tiny catches my eye under a large piece of coral in the back corner. I reached in and pulled out the coral only to discover the bones of the pink cichlid. It had been wedged between the rocks and the coral on the bottom of the tank. Somehow the other 3 cichlids had murdered the pink one and telepathically framed me for it. Not only did they frame me, they got me to confess. My mate's mum is a doctor, who assisted on the following, which I thought was an urban myth. A 18-year-old guy was playing rugby league and after a massive tackle, his hip cleanly dislocated. They called the paramedics to come, who arrived ridiculously fast considering the injury and proceeded to pop the hip back into place. The guy was screaming already from the pain of the dislocation, but when they popped it back in, he lost his it, totally, screaming and wailing like nothing else that they had heard. As it turns out, in the process of the dislocation, a lot of the muscles around that general groin area had pulled, including the testicles. One of them had gotten caught in the hip joint when it was popped back in. After when they got him to the hospital, they diagnosed the issue and had to re-dislocate it to get it back out. Also, if anyone feels bad for the guy, he had run out on his then pregnant GF about 3 weeks before. The bastard deserved it. Once, waiting in line at a restaurant, I see the guy in front of me. I think I recognize him, but I don't know what from. The entire time I am waiting, I am searching in my brain as to why I knew him. He turns to me and says, "Do I know you?" We both stood there for a good 10 minutes, going through high schools, workplaces, friends, etc. Anything to find out why we knew each other. As far as we could tell, though, there is no reason at all we should have ever met before. But we both clearly recognized each other. To this day, no clue. This happened back in my undergrad days on the day of an econ midterm. Because the lecture hall is so large and the class has about 300 students, the professor needs a microphone in order to speak to the class. So he's in front of the class giving his whole speech about the exam. 50 questions, multiple choice. Make sure to write your name on the Scantron. Turn it in up here where you're done, etc. Finally he bids us all good luck and leaves the lecture hall into his office, which is in the adjacent room. Well, he didn't realize that he left his microphone on, so while the entire class is dead silent during this exam, we all listen to the events that unfolded inside his office. We hear the brief muffled conversation he is having with the female TA of our class. Then the conversation stops and it becomes painfully evident that they are having sex. The quieted moans of the TA are magnified on the speakers in the lecture hall. The entire class remains dead silent, no one wanting to be the first to make some kind of move. Finally the professor yells loudly, "Oh duck," and the microphone abruptly shuts off. 20 minutes later the prof walks out into the lecture hall as if nothing happened. He was fired a week later. TL. Dr. Professor leaves microphone on during exam and class listens to him bang his TA in his office. So honey, wanna try anal tonight? I was 7 years old playing Pokemon for the first time. My brother was 14 and told me about this game a little more. Then he speaks to me about Suicune. No ducking idea how to spell that. Sue me. And he said that he is constantly moving at every step you take and that only the luckiest would find him. Since it was about a 10 million chance 1-1. Luckiest. Duck you, I said. I'm finding him. As soon as this conversation was over I enter in a battle with little more hope than the average battle. I now had a reason to fight. With a prayer I looked at the materializing Pokemon and it wasn't the shape of any grass Pokemon I knew. My eyes grew wide and my jaw dropped. My brother looked at me and said, "What's going on?" To which I only replied, "Dart, no ducking way. I did it. I found Suicune." It was of course on my screen and I had the master ball up and ready to catch the itch. TLDR. I was talking about a very rare thing and it happened almost instantly. More of a big coincidence than anything. First week of college my junior year, sometime during the day one day I lose the dongle on my laptop charger. I look everywhere for it and can't find it anywhere. I get back to the room that night and my roommate asked how my day was. I tell him about losing the dongle and looking everywhere and he gets this weird look on his face. He looks at me and says, "Was it black and about this long?" while holding his fingers apart. I tell him yes, but I figure he's just ducking with me. He asked, "Did it have a yellow tip with a little white strip attached to it saying HP?" I tell him yes, but I still figure he's ducking with me. He looks at me and says, "Dude, I'm so sorry, but when I was leaving the cafe this morning I see this little black thing on the sidewalk." I pick it up and start looking at it for some reason, and I can't explain why I did it. But as I was passing the dumpster I just blurt out, "Sucks for this guy," and throw it right in. He insists he wasn't ducking with me, so we put on some itty clothes and went dumpster diving. Only took about 20 minutes to find it. Of the 2000 plus students that attend my university, a person to find it and, like a douche, throw it away was my roommate. Back in 2006 my brother and I were in Berlin, just being around, when these two Russian girls asked out to us in Russian. Confused we replied in English, "Nothing." Then in German, and turns out they just wanted someone to take their picture. We oblige, then get talking and hang out the rest of the day. After dinner we say goodbye and part ways. Fast forward to 2010. I'm using Livemecha to learn Russian and out of boredom, I click the link to review English submissions. I find one of a girl practicing ordering food in a restaurant. I see the display picture and think this girl's hot. Click her profile and I'm like, okay, this girl looks really ducking familiar. I sent her a message and we start exchanging this and that. Well, don't you know it? It's the same ducking girl from Berlin. We got together over the summer in Holland and I think she's the one. This isn't that amazing, but when I was in 3rd grade my sister and I were taken by our father to Toys R Us to get our first Pokemon cards. It was just when Pokemon cards got really popular, so it was a big deal. We received 5 packs each after waiting in line behind dozens of other crazy parents. We had to wait outside the store before it opened. On our way home my sister opens her first pack of cards and there it is. Charizard. I nearly had myself trying to explain how amazing of a card she had just received. Her response, oh it's shiny. I'm positive this will get buried, but I like telling this anyways. While visiting family in Michigan for our family reunion a few years ago, I live in California. There was a KKK rally in the small town that we were staying in. Being a young black teenager semi-flipping it that there is an actual white supremacist rally going on, I decided to hole up in the grocery store where, coincidentally, 6 other black people, most likely everyone of color in the town, were camping out as well. I made eye contact with a guy that looked nearly exactly like me, just slightly older. He claimed to be driving through the town because he is on a road trip with his friends from Hialeah, Florida. I told him I was born there and then adopted and moved to California. He was immediately curious about the implications of how this happened, and I told him my biological mother's name and that she was too young to take care of me, so she had me adopted. After he hears this, he pulls out a picture of his mother at her high school prom. I reach for my wallet, numb with incredulity as my fingers pull free the same exact picture of this young woman. We have the same mom. We're long lost brothers. TLDR. I was stuck in a convenience store during a KKK rally in a random town and found my long lost brother of 16 years. I'm really bad at telling stories, but I'll try my best. When I was about 10 I traveled to Newfoundland where I made one friend who was the same age as me. I was only there for a week and left to come back home. Fast forward 10 years, without any contact between us. I'm waiting outside my classroom for the previous class to finish. And who walks out? Yeah, the one friend I had made 10 years ago. A while ago, My dad and I had a driver pick us up from San Francisco airport to drive us home. Since there was a lot of traffic, we had a bunch of time to talk and shoot the it. Turned out that the driver's daughter was the fiancée of my dad's nephew, my cousin, who both live in Cleveland. We attended the wedding a few months later and again reconnected with the driver while there. We started talking some more, and then he introduced us to his wife. Apparently, her and my dad went to the same high school, graduated the same year, and even dated for a few months. This was in a very small suburban town outside of Cleveland. Small world, indeed. I worked at a small restaurant on the north shore of Lake Superior the summer of my junior year in college. The woman who owned it was an ultra-conservative fundamentalist Christian. They sold plots of land to people for Y2K. After a full summer full of craziness, I had enough and wanted to go on a trip. My brother and I and a friend decided to go see the Grand Canyon. So I told the owner that I had to work on a paper for Bible school and would like to leave a couple weeks early. She was reluctant, but in the end sent me off with her blessing because I was doing the Lord's work. So we head out on a road trip to the Grand Canyon, never bothering to look on a map as to where it actually was. We ended up somewhere out west at a place called the Grand Canyon that looked totally unimpressive. So we headed up to Glacier National Park as an alternative. We pulled into a gas station near Glacier, and who the duck do I see but the owner that I'd lied to, and her entire family that I'd gotten to know throughout the summer. I ducked down in the car while my brother walked by them and looked at me with this "what the duck" expression on his face. We tore out of there and I never saw them again. What are the odds? I was at a car show and I was raising my hand so my parents could see I was still next to the old Cadillac Batmobile. Next thing I know, someone has high-fived me. I look over and it was Adam West. He winked, smiled, and walked away to do more signings or something. It was glorious. I followed O.J. Simpson the night of the freeway chase. Went to his house and watched him get arrested. I wouldn't call it my favorite, because this is just off the top of my head, but it is the only thing I can think of at the moment. Last week I was hanging around outside one of the buildings on campus between classes and I saw some guy come out of the doors who looked extremely similar to one of my TAs last year. I thought to myself, holy it, that looks like so and so, but I knew it wasn't him. But the fact that it looked like the TA made me think back on that class I had last year for a few moments. Literally 30 seconds after the lookalike walks out of the door, the actual TA came out of the door. It was very strange. Almost like being reminded and subsequently thinking about the person had summoned them. I went out cruising with a friend of mine and his friends. It was late, probably around 1 AM or so, and we were cruising down Main Street. Up ahead the traffic came to almost a crawl. This is weird since it's late at night. We could see up ahead that there were 3 Ford Focuses all lined up and purposefully slowing traffic. My friend's older brother, who was driving, hops in the median and guns it up to the Focuses. We see that it's just a bunch of kids getting their rocks off doing sholish things. The driver says, "Oh duck no." He turns to my friend and says, "You know what to do." He speeds ahead of the 3 Focuses and pulls up on the side of the street. My friend grabs a cordless drill from the back of the Suburban, the vehicle we were in, jumps out of the vehicle and takes off the license plate. The Focuses were past us at this point, still going slow to piss off the people behind them. My friend gets back in the Suburban and we take off. The driver speeds up to the Focuses, gets in the median next to the far left Focus, flips them off, then crashes his Suburban into the Focus, which in turn crashes into the other Focuses. At this point I am like, what the duck just happened? We watch for a minute as we watch these kids trying to get over their airbags and start assessing the damage. Everyone in the vehicle is busting up laughing and we take off flying down Main Street. When we got back to my friend's house, he puts the license plate back on and pops the dent out of the Suburban. TLDR. A friend's brother purposefully crashed into 3 cars because the people were driving like jackasses. We got away with it.